This is Middle Waters Dope Leaders series, where I get to have deep conversations with dope leaders of color doing racial equity work, racial justice work. Middle Waters is all about resisting white supremacy through cultivating brave, transformative, anti racist leaders. And we cannot do that if we're unable to talk openly about the challenges that leaders of color face in doing this work. So, let me introduce to you my beautiful friends and guests, Krishana, John, and Derek. I'll let you all introduce yourselves. If you could please racially identify who you are, and then feel free to say, whatever you'd like to say um, about yourself that you'd like to share with our viewers. Krishana, you want to go first?
I will. Hello, hello, Tracy. I love you. Thank you for inviting me to your discussion with John and Derek. My name is Krishana Roberson. I am a Black woman and president of Collaborate Consulting, where I collaboratively work with all kinds of leaders to elevate themselves and others. I got a slew of experience doing all kinds of wonderful and hard racial equity work. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it, but yet I am still here standing. So, with that, I will pass it on to John.
Well, thanks, Rashana. Thank you for having me, Tracy. It's good to see you. It's good to see everybody. My name is John Eckloff. You see him pronouns. I identify as a biracial Filipino American. I have done equity work in education for the better half of a decade, K through 12 as well as higher ed, and currently I work for local government. But one day I'm gonna be like my heroes, Tracy and Krishana, and I'll venture off into entrepreneurship and start my own business. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And I'll pass the mic to Derek.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Tracy, just for this invitation. Just appreciate the opportunity to share space with yourself and John and Krishana. My name is Derek Wheeler Smith. I identify as Black. My pronouns are he, him, his. Right now, I feel like I'm mostly identified as Judah and Jaden and Jael's dad because I've got like three little people. So, that kind of shifts and changes. But being their dad is definitely the most important work to me. And so I think I'll introduce myself that way, as raising them is really the most important thing that I'll engage in. And yeah, I'm happy to be here in space. I currently also serve and work in local government, and happy to participate in this conversation.
Thanks, y'all. So, today's discussion is going to be about fear based leadership. Not really, what we want to see, but something that we absolutely need to overcome. So, let's just get to it. So, you all have like come up, in ranks, right? Like you have worked hard and you've made it to, high positions. I would say what is deemed, right, as like high positions of leadership within an organization. And you've done amazing work. And it's, to me, is something that I deem as very transformational. And you've also worked alongside in this process, like other leaders, that are either trying to do the same work or are doing the same work. And so, as leaders of color, what fears did you have to overcome to get, where you are today? So, John, you want to start us off?
Yeah, for sure. There was a handful of fears that I had to overcome to get where I'm at. Specifically, I had a fear of being invisible. For a good portion of my career, I was at the lower part of the organizational chart, and I mean, I was able to get a coordinator or specialist job, but nothing beyond that. And it felt like I mean, my ideas are just gonna, they're just gonna stay ideas, and I wouldn't be able to like, break that ceiling. And so there was this fear of like wondering if I would always be, relegated to these spaces. Um, I had to overcome the fear of rejection. When I was when I matter of fact when I was working with Krishana and you, Tracy, I was I dealt with a lot of rejection of jobs that I was applying for. I'd make it to the interview stage, like associate director jobs, assistant director jobs, but then it just wouldn't pan out, and just having to stomach a few of those, um, in or coupled with getting rejected to the different law schools that I was applying to, it was a lot. And I think all of that culminated when because like I was trying to get into school or law school for like a year and a half, almost 2 years, and then and like my dream was to go to Harvard. I wanted to be like Barack Obama, and
Mhm.
I put all my eggs in that basket, and wished on a star, did everything that you could to be able to try to make something happen. But then, you know, lo and behold, I think it was in March of 2018 when I got the news. It was in the spring, and I was working my second job because we were saving up for our wedding. And I mean, I vividly remember the day I went into the bathroom because I was like, okay, nobody needs to see this. Opened it up, and like I remember because you have to like log in and then click on a website, and I was like, this is going to change my life either way. And I clicked on the website, and yeah, it told me I didn't get in, and it was having put so much energy for so long into that, and then getting told no was yeah, I mean, I was devastated, and it took me a little bit to kind of like sit in that space. Um, but then after after a few days or so of soaking, I realized that like I'm still gonna try. I'm still gonna apply for schools, and I'm still gonna apply for jobs. And I felt like I had something in me.
Mhm.
And fast forward about 5 or 6 months, I do finally get admitted into law school, at Seattle University, and then I landed the job as a chief diversity officer of a community college. You know what I'm saying? And I wasn't even applying for those. I like that. I mean, that was just by chance. I was trying to get an assistant director job, and now all of a sudden, I went from being a specialist now to being the executive director of an entire college for doing equity work. And that's when I knew, like, oh yeah, I'm cooking with some sauce. And I turned a corner because I knew I had this in me. It felt like the world wasn't seeing it, but I was able to validate, or it was validating to just get my little toe in the door. Because from there, I was able to I like to think that it helped make some change. Um, but I had to overcome that fear of rejection, and I knew that if I could get rejected from Harvard and bounce back, then I could. There's nothing that's gonna there's no rejection more painful. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
because I had it in me. So
Mhm.
that was a fear. Of course, even and it didn't stop there because I had imposter syndrome after the
You
once
mean
the
once you got into the job?
yeah, yeah, because like now my colleagues are executives that have been doing this for at least 10, if not 20, if not 30 years, and I'm just here like, do I really belong in this space? Like the natural progression is that I got a few more steps to go, but I made a huge jump, and it took a little bit to just kind of get my footing and realize the um the implications of my title, what that meant, how I show up in the space, and if I try to like be cordial or relational, that doesn't mean that there may be a barrier because people are just won't be able to connect with me in the same way as they were in previous roles, of the just because of the what my name tag says.
Right.
And so it was yeah, it was heavy, but just had to work through it and realize that like I belong in this space too, and it doesn't matter if people have 20 years on me, because what counts is what you bring at the table, and what you do in the
Mhm.
moment. And so it was it's a journey, it still is, but that was definitely some fears I had to overcome.
Yeah. And you like you said, and I think what is I think hard for some folks to grasp is that it really is just believing in yourself. Like if you could just believe in yourself, I'm sure there were people who love you that were like supporting you and, telling you that you can do it. But ultimately, like you not believing in yourself could have prevented all of those next things from happening.
For sure.
Right. So I definitely want folks to hear that because you kind of minimize it when you say it, like, it just took time and, eventually like time was the answer, but it wasn't. It was really like you continuing to believe in yourself and
Hmm.
that you, like you said, which I think is really huge, is that you belong there. And I
Hmm.
think that's what a lot of folks don't actually see as possible
Hmm.
is that they actually belong in these positions
Hmm.
because they've been told that they shouldn't.
Right. Or
And
the,
John, you named something that is really, really valid. Is this belief system that we need to move in this way in these steps, right? It's kind of like the narrative, well, you need to go to school and get a college degree and accumulate student debt and then get a job that doesn't allow you to pay for that student debt. I'm sorry, I'm on a tangent. I'm gonna come right back. Um, but it's important, like part of that fear is disrupting that narrative
right.
that you got to be here, you got to be there, you got to be here in order to be able to reach this pinnacle of not only where you know that you could do the job and I can do the job with my eyes closed. There doesn't naturally have to be a phase and a process and steps unless I am a doctor slicing into your body
For sure.
doing a heart transplant,
Right.
right? Then yeah, there's steps. I
Right.
get that.
Right.
But when you talk about the progression of folks trying to get into leadership roles and this idea, oh, well, you needed to do this before you can do that, before you can do that, none of that. And part of that is dispelling that lives within us.
Hmm.
mhm,
Hmm. Yeah.
Because from the time of your interview, I recognize greatness.
Mm.
mm,
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned it because, part of what uh, compelled me or moved me to even shoot my shot was knowing that, I had an example of what leadership looks like with you. You know what I'm saying? And there's so many, like, oftentimes I think with young aspiring employees of color, you know, we're often told there's a very specific like box of like this is how you have to show up to be a leader. This is how you have to look. This is how you have to talk. This is how you have to be. And you broke that mold. And I still apply the things that you taught me that you shared. Best boss I've ever had. In what I do now. You know what I mean? And it was part of that, of just knowing that like I could be myself and I could show up and look like me and sound like me and get the job done. Leadership doesn't have to look old, white, and what has traditionally been considered leaders,
mhm. What you
Yeah.
got to add, Derek? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, man, the conversation's great. I'm just kind of got my sponge out, really just soaking up um, all that these guys are bringing into the space. But I think it's for me, it's this thing of like leadership of self and realizing like how much the hardest leadership job that I will ever have is really leading me,
Mm,
right? Like it's not leading up or leading laterally or leading down. Like no, it's really leading me and doing the mirror work, right? That I have to do to understand my shadow side that maybe keeps me really from walking right into the fullness of my light, right, and my potential. And some of that are things that I'm just deeply socialized around, right, in terms of how to be, right, and how to move. And I think to John's point, it's this narrow box. And so when you do have a leader, right, like Krishana, who shows up in space as like her full self, right, and brings the fullness of who she is, it actually expands and opens up the place because now it tells a John that he's got an opportunity to come in and to do what? To be himself, right? And to not feel like he has to like fit into this narrow box. And I think for a lot of black and brown leaders, we've been socialized to believe that you have to be this certain kind of way. And really, what that certain kind of way is, it's assimilation, right? Can we just name it, right, and call it? It's like you need to assimilate, and you better dress like this, and you need to talk like this. Make sure you present in these ways, because if you do, right, then um, you'll be accepted because you're making sure that the white folks in the space are comfortable, right? Because that's what they're looking for. And so anyways, it takes that kind of leadership to break the mold. The other thing that I would say that resonated with me in terms of like John was, because I had some very similar things that I think are deeply connected to that leadership itself, in terms of being able to overcome rejection. And some of that just stems from my childhood, right? My pops, not being there and how that impacted me. I think about hyper visibility and invisibility, right, as a result of that. And some of the challenges that I faced as a result of that, I think, are deeply tied to needing to be correct in order to avoid criticism or punishment,
Mm,
right? Because of the stories that I told myself around how I need to show up, and yeah, I don't need him, and I'm gonna be fine, and right. And so feeling like I need to be perfect because maybe if I'm perfect, you'll see me because there's got to be something wrong with me, right? And so we keep going and we do all the damn things, and you like, it ain't nothing wrong with me. You got 50 degrees, you done did all the things, right? And it really just needed to be that internal work to come to grips with, like, man, what's possible? And I think the restoration of the power of our imaginations that I think are like taken from us and beaten out of us, by this system that tells you you ain't fast enough, you didn't grow up in the right neighborhood, you ain't smart enough, your parents wasn't in the right tax bracket, you're too black, you know what I'm saying? You talk too loud, right? Like all of this stuff. And then you just start stripping yourself, and it's like, what's left? You know what I'm
mhm.
saying? Nothing's left because I've decided to show up in a way because I bought into the seduction of whiteness. You know what I'm saying? And I've decided to lose myself for a six-figure salary in a corner office, and that ain't the gig. I'm not here for it, and I know y'all aren't either. But yeah, those are the things that just kind of came up for me listening to y'all share.
How do you think folks get there though? Because when I feel like I've had moments with folks and like they get this concept, right? They conceptually know that it's an internal conflict that's going on. But they're not I, I still feel like there are other fears or like real fears. I mean, I don't like want to minimize the potential like of somebody losing their livelihood. They lose their jobs and they're equating their jobs to their livelihood for like providing for their family because I know with all of you, like we have a high value of family and right, providing for our families is a huge deal. And even if we can imagine, like even if we could imagine what could be, like we can imagine that we could show up authentically, right? But we're like still afraid of like losing the money or losing the job or whatever. Like, how do you get past that? Oh, we lost Derek. All right, so we had a little technical issue. Derek's computer kicked him out of the conversation. So we're going to continue with the conversation. Hopefully he will be able to join us. But we're gonna I want to get into this juicy topic. So some know me to be very judgmental. I see, I kind of like try to flip it and hope to say that that's really a gift of like, sometimes just seeing things from a different perspective. But I have been very judgmental around a lot of leaders of color that I have felt weren't doing enough. I mean, even we've been in conversations about leaders of color that were like, they're not really doing enough. Oh, here he's Derek's joining us. So, um, and a lot of times I feel like the harsh judgment comes when like I watch these folks like actually harm other folks of color, right? Like they're in positions of power. Hey, Derek, welcome back.
Thank you. I don't got one of them high positions like Krishana and John, so I'm still on AOL dial-up. But
Whatever.
The dialogue.
Whatever. We just got back on, and I just gonna jump to the other question
okay.
that we can end with tonight because I think this is the juicier. Well, this is the one I grapple with the most, and I feel like maybe this is selfish me having this conversation with y'all, but talking about judging leaders of color who aren't doing enough, and I was saying specifically like when I feel like they're harming folks. It's not like they're, I just like, you should be doing like A through Z and you're not doing enough. It's like, no, what you're actually doing is putting folks of color in harm. People are, leaving, like people are having real emotional suffering from like stuff that you're doing. Right. And, me specifically, like really comparing them to Uncle Tom's and like not feeling like they're really here for folks of color. Like they're here to serve white people. And but they're not, but their actual title is to do equity work, right? Are they actually in these positions to do equity work? So I just wanted to like talk about it, like what do you have to say about that? Because I feel like most of the time I can't really say that, and that like that's a really bad thing to do, especially as a woman of color and especially as a non-black woman of color, right? Like for me with my light skin privilege to criticize like another leader of color, maybe not, especially if they have darker skin than me, like not necessarily knowing like the full extent of like what they've had to face or what they're dealing with or any of those things. Like I sometimes tell myself that I need to have a lot more grace, but how much grace and for how long, and should I really say anything? These are just the things I think of.
So as a Black woman, I am at the bottom, the very bottom, when it comes to like leadership. We are Black women are most underrepresented group in corporate America, hands down, right? And the things that you have to give up in order to get to these roles. And a perfect example that I can give, in a previous organization, I worked for someone who led equity work. Not really. And to do this work, there is a level of courageousness and fearlessness that you have to have that you can't get unless you do your own work. Unless you know that you're going to be able to show up. This is how I am. I will not be sitting here code switching to make you feel comfortable. All the while my butt is puckering because I don't even know who the hell this is talking like this. Nah, that's not how this work goes. And it goes back to what Derek said earlier, that particularly Black women and Black women that I have known in leadership roles, we have had to contort and fold ourselves to assimilate to be able to get to that level, right? I'm often reminded when I ran for office, the shit that I had to do in order to just run, knowing that my opponent, who was a white woman, didn't even need to show up. So when I look at other folks of color who are going through this, particularly Black women, I know a lot of Black women in leadership roles that contort because I'm trying to get to the next level, and we are already the lowest group of individuals in leadership roles, and it's already hard. And I don't know how to be anything than what they tell me I need to be. So yes, a level of grace has to be afforded. And there are questions that I often ask, particularly the other Black leaders that I coach. And I ask, who has been your favorite boss? How do they racially identify? None of them have been. I've yet to talk to somebody, with the exception of John just now, that told me their boss was a Black woman. So in knowing that, what pieces of yourself do you wish you can just show up at work and be? Oh, girl, I wish I could show up in my bonnet. Why don't you just show up in your bonnet? I wish I could just say what I'm thinking. Does Karen say what she's thinking? Oh, well, I can't do that, right? Derek named it earlier when he said that hypervisibility and invisibility. I am hypervisible, being the only Black woman in a majority of the roles that I've led in those positions, from AXA to Coca-Cola to Bellevue. I'm it. Who am I seeing that's modeling that it's okay for me to show up and be who I need to be? Unless you got, folks who are mentoring you, and I shout out my unicorn Tanisha. I shout out my the folks that help me recognize that it's all right to just show up. The more that happens, that's when we'll see it. But from a Black woman perspective, what I know the fears to be is I can't if I'm trying to get to that next level because we're already not here.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when I tell you my experience is different, nobody believes me because it's just a bunch of white people around me who have no idea what it is to experience racism or that it even exists in some moment. So yes, you got to have grace. You have to meet people where they are and not where you think they need to be, even though they're doing this work.
I agree.
And if you can call them out, call them out. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it don't.
What y'all thinking? John and Darren?
I
Man, it. Go
oh,
ahead,
go
John.
I agree that I agree with Krishana about you have to be able to afford a level of grace to folks um, for a lot of reasons, because I always think about uh, I don't know what that was. We can edit this part out, but when, when you're thinking about grace, like, so I had at one of my previous jobs, there was a leader of color that early in my career, it kind of targeted me. I didn't report directly to him, but he tried to embarrass me a couple times and just, was difficult to work with. And I remember writing about that, like my love for our ancestors is a lot stronger than his desire to try to forget them, you know?
Mm.
And so I think that for anybody, any person of color in the United States, you have to be able to give them grace, you know? Hurt people. And so, you don't get to whatever level you attain without, picking up some scars along the way. And oftentimes, people are imperfect and that's going to manifest. I do think that there's a distinction because if people are being malicious and just like in these positions and intentionally going out of their way to harm other people of color in a way to appease, uh, the white majority leaders, that's a really big issue. That's a serious issue. Um, Also, we always have to think about like when you're in these positions, it's a impossible role because to a large portion of folks, they're going to say that you're not doing enough,
Yeah.
and to other people, they're going to say you're going too far. And so there's has to be grace because you're going to be in an unwinnable position. You're going to be, as Brother Derek put it, you're going to be seduced by whiteness and the temptation of the title, of the salary, of just the access to resources. That's like a gilded cage. After a while, you kind of get accustomed to it, and you want to stay in this place. So all of the scrutiny that you're under, all of the criticism that you're going to endure, on top of so many chances for you to lose yourself because of your position, that is a very, very narrow tightrope to try to walk around. And so I always try to give folks grace. Now, granted, I mean, one time, two times, three times, okay, that's all right. By the third time, I'm looking at you funny. But if you've been there for years and you're continually harming people, and you can see the pattern of who they're harming, then you
Yeah.
can put the pieces together, and it's just like, all right, well, that's just an issue. And I would venture to say that those aren't leaders.
Mm.
Those are people in leadership positions, but those aren't
Mhm.
leaders, you know. Um, and so, I mean, that's what comes up for me.
Mm.
Yeah, agreed. I think that there's black leaders and then there's leading blacks.
Mm.
And I think the leading blacks are folks that just get positioned right, like strategically, because they are willing to be seduced by whiteness and whatever that means, you know what I'm saying, for them, whatever the object is that they're after, whether that's resemblance of power, because usually it's like this pseudo power, money, title, whatever, right? Like whatever those things are. And I it's hard because there's still their humanity that we want to argue. I mean, that we want to honor, but it's hard to have grace for leading blacks because you know good and damn well what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? And you know that your heart really isn't kind of in this work, and that you just decided that this is about self-preservation and you alone, right? Um, I think to John's point, and even to Krishana, it's like, yeah, I can have grace though for like somebody that's doing the work, and we're just adaptively trying to figure out because they just, there's these barriers and blockers and challenges, and you know what I mean, folks strategically organizing against you, and all of those things that come up in the process. But to get there, I think I love what Krishana offered around. Sometimes it's really asking those questions, man, and really being able to just like see where someone's at. A simple question, the question that we're all familiar with, right? Which is like, how have you colluded with whiteness in your previous organization, right? And when people just can't even like begin to grapple with that, or don't even want to acknowledge that, and can't even think about the ways that both like the oppressor and the oppressed like live in, like when you haven't done your work around that, oh man, you're dangerous as hell. Like there were some of the most dangerous people to be around.
Mhm.
So it's a balance, right? And it's kind of situational. You know what I mean? Like it's both and we have to identify that. And in both situations, it's really about accountability, and how do we have accountability that's mutual, and where's the opportunities for us to kind of heal? And that's what I think the biggest issue is, right? Like nobody creates space and margins in this work for us to heal, because we're in a system where everything is about what could be counted and measured. Like, how do you count and measure healing? And like, what does that look like, right? I think like trying to articulate it can be challenging, but we know what it's like when it's in the room and when it's in the space and when it's happening to us and with us and for us. And I just think for so long, our focus has been about all the things that we're trying to dismantle and destroy. So we're fighting against poverty, and we're fighting against racism, and we're fighting for women's rights, and right. And so we're so anti that I feel like it's just convoluted our hearts in ways because we just haven't been given the space to go, who's creating margins, man, for us to heal, right? Because tearing down the things that hurt us all and that break us down is not nearly as powerful as building the stuff that heals us. But this work is so jacked up, it gets us distracted from that. And and we got to grapple with that. And then to your point, and then we got to deal with, with these gatekeepers, these Uncle Ruckuses, Uncle Toms, whatever, you want to call them, right? Who are there, and man, they doing exactly what they signed up for. So it could be a lot to navigate.
Yeah.
These roles, it's so nuanced because Derek named it. Like, there is no measure for y'all to get some damn act right and have an inclusive organization. Your measures is when I ain't complaining. That's what it is, right? And nobody's measuring that, right? So it's this idea that Derek hit on, I have to heal not only the Black people that are already, and people of color who are in these organizations, but the white people that don't even realize all the trauma and all the harm that they're causing to themselves and their others, because you don't know what you don't know. So and as we were talking while we were waiting for Derek to get back on, there's a shelf life in these roles. 3 to 5 years is a shelf life where you're going to get to, that's it. I'm done. Otherwise, you are either going to be dipped, rolls, fried in crack, meth, and tequila. And your mental health is going to be gone. Because because folks who choose to do this work, you don't choose to go into this work just because. I had somebody say, can you tell me how I could be a DEI consultant? Hell no. Because it's not something I can tell you. It's something that you're called to do because of the level of humanity that you have to give of yourself in order to move others. So when you're in that space and when you're in these roles, It's so much you got to balance. You got somebody telling you to run some numbers. Run some numbers. Do you see that we still have all of these harassment claims and racialized incidences that are happening across our organization? Or that doesn't matter
Mhm.
versus everything else. So these roles are so difficult.
Mhm.
And the folks who are hired in them, you can look at whether the measures of the work for how long folks stay in the roles.
Mhm.
If you got a DEI director that's been in the role for like 8 years, 8, 10 years,
Facts. No, that's real.
Mhm.
versus you got folks coming in and out of the roles. I did some stuff. I can say I did this and I can did this. I can move on. Let me see where else I can do, because otherwise you will get burnt out. You will get so tired and trying to fix and wonder why people aren't moving.
Mm.
That's why. So what Derek said is so boom, 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 because it's hard to do this work. It's so hard to do this work and know that you can't sit anywhere in a long time. You can't.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you know, the thing that I've seen um, in my time doing DEI work is that when an organization has a department, an equity department, you know, oftentimes they're not really going to have that much authority, or they're not going to have enough of the institutional power to really effectuate change. That you just don't see it, and depending on how far along the organization is in their journey, in their maturity, if you will really reflect how willing they are to go there, to really like change the policies, to really analyze their procedures, to really come up with recruitment and retention plans that validate and affirm their most marginalized employees. Most times, that's not the case,
Mm.
and what is that you got leadership and you know they recognize what's in the air, they see what's happening in the world. There are all of these buzzwords, so they got to make sure that they do something. They're really unsure what to do, but they know they have to do something. And then you see all these equity departments sprout up, particularly after the summer with George Floyd.
Mhm.
And you know if you don't really know how to drive a car but you know you need to buy one, how effective are you going to be able to travel anywhere? you know
Mhm.
and so like the realization that I'm coming to is that the next stage, I mean, again, it goes back to like, yo, Tracy and Krishana, you all are doing it. Like
Mhm.
effective, true, like justice, equity work. I mean, you can't be in the just a department. Like you got to be the CEO, or you got to be the president, or you have to be part of the board, or however you want to structure these institutions. But unless it's like at the core and at the foundation of an organization, the results that you produce are going to be mixed at best. And back to Derek's point, really quick about this idea of like, there's a war on everything. We're fighting, we're fighting, we're fighting. So many of these roles, because they're not given power, the one thing that they do have is their ability to critique. So
Yeah.
they'll break it down and they'll tell you exactly what's wrong with the system, or they'll tell you exactly what's wrong with these policies. And what I encountered, what was so hard for me when I made that shift, was that I had flexed that muscle so much. I could tell you everything wrong with the workplace, but what I realized was that that's not what was required of me. I was given the keys of like, all right, well, here's the green light, go ahead and make something happen. And so I had to come from a place of creativity. I had to come from a place of like, well, I always wanted to be in this space. Pretty much given, carte blanche to do whatever. I mean, within reason. Um, but I like didn't know because like I was just so accustomed to criticizing. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
so easy to tell somebody else what they're not doing, and it's incredibly difficult to try to help somebody think of something new, think of a new way of showing up, think of a new way of living, a new way of going to work. You know what I mean? Of like creating a new system or procedures or policies or what have you that affirm people's humanity. It's very hard to do well because anyone could have something, written down, and it's, and oftentimes it just ends up being performative. But trying to do, like, all right, well, how do we meaningfully transform this organization,
Mhm.
and reduce harm? That's very hard. It's very hard, and oftentimes people miss it more times than not. And all the folks that's on the sideline going to tell you what you did wrong and what you should have did. But as soon as you invite them, I'm sorry, now I'm getting personal. But as soon as you invite them on and ask them, well, what do you think? Then it's radio silence.
Mhm. Yeah. I think y'all, you know, I don't know. I still feel like this, like, "Nah, I have some grace. I have some grace." And then, like, kind of to Derek's point, like, I think what I'm hearing, what's coming through for me is like just having discernment, like having discernment with the people that I'm working with that are in these positions, right? Because I am in a consultant role now. I'm not in the organization. And so I'm working with folks from an outside view, right? And so I think just having discernment between what I'm kind of gathering is like how much of their self-work have they done, right? Not just like shooting them down immediately because the behavior that's in front of me says, maybe they're this, that, or that, or whatever. But like having the conversation and then having the discernment of like how much of their own work have they done, and then offering maybe like supporting that work when there's that desire to actually have like a, they have the desire, and there's a want that's beyond kind of, Derek, what you were saying, which is like that self-preservation. I don't know, that tends to for me to be pretty easy to spot on after a few times, right? Like after witnessing a few occasions. So I think like what I'm appreciating is just, there's a way that I think I can discern, but that honors humanity, but also honors like really the impact on folks of color, right? Like, and if I'm really trying to support a transformation for the people, like within an organization, like being able to kind of manage both, if that makes sense. Um, it's hard work. Like I 100% agree with that. And I agree that there's a burnout. And the other thing that is so like always on my heart is like, and there's like, 30 plus people of color within that organization that are suffering, that this position has some power over to change. And so, are they a leverage point to that? Are they not a leverage point to that? Are they even somebody I should focus on? Maybe not. And how do I help bring the healing, which is more important, like for the folks of color? And if that person wants to join, great. If not, maybe that's not where the energy needs to be at.
John made such a good point. I think one of the scariest things of me going out on my own is getting out of my mindset of what I think this work should be, how this work should be done versus how I know it needs to be done. And part of that, when you have folks of color, I have made it. I will not work with an organization if I don't work with their leadership and their C-suite at the top, because I can't get to healing of their folks of color if you're not willing to do your work first. So if y'all realize once they come to me with, oh yeah, we need an assessment, y'all don't need no damn assessment. Let me tell y'all what y'all need. Y'all need to understand the difference between this terminology you keep rolling around, because if you can't define the difference between equity and equality,
Hmm.
then you're not going to understand anything that's happening. So when you're trying to get to that sweet spot of the folks of color, nothing can happen without the leadership okaying, yep, this is the training that's going to happen. Yes, we recognize this is what needs to be. And I think that was the scariest part of getting proposals and then me declining them, because I'm yeah, yep, your folks of color who are leading equity work don't have the power, the position, or the authority to make the changes that need to happen. So therefore, I'm only going to cause more harm to them. And that's also a very difficult part when you know you got these folks in there that need the healing, that need the support. Nothing can happen without leadership saying this is what it's going to be. Yes, this is what can happen. And that is the hardest part of dealing with this, and particularly when you have small groups of color who are dying, right? And then also knowing if this organization had a bias training from 1991,
I mute myself for that.
it's also understanding too what work have you done and what do you think this work is about. If you think it's just about bias training, well, we went through the bias training. Oh, y'all still looking at them videos like the sexual harassment videos that are from 1980 that look at the same thing. And that's what you also have to consider too if you're folks of color. This is all the training that they've gotten. If they haven't even looked at, they're not even looking at themselves first, but if the organization is giving them these broad ideas on what equity and inclusion is and diversity, and you know I hate that damn word diversity, and that's their focus,
Mm-hmm.
then the work is going to be harder, particularly for those folks of color. It
Yeah.
really, really is.
Well, no, go ahead, Derek.
Oh, no, I just was saying I appreciate and respect Krishana's approach in terms of just value-based leadership, right? Because I think the conversation that we don't have often is how so much of this stuff is so interwoven that we don't know where like one part starts and the other part ends. And when I say this stuff, I'm talking about racism, capitalism, Christianity, you know what I'm saying? Nationalism, like it's all woven so tight. And so just drawing that connection, I'm saying to capitalism and to survival, right? And Krishana as a leader could easily just say, man, I'm an independent contractor. I got my own business. I'm gonna take this contract, but no, right? To just have that kind of value to say, no, I'm not gonna be harming folks if that's not what your organization is. And I think this is deeply about mirror work, right? And most organizations, no matter what it is, or institutions, would rather look out the window than look in the mirror. And the bigger question, and I think this happens for me, and I'm sure it happens for you, John, and other folks, it's like you take these jobs and people want to immediately turn you into a hero, you know, like, oh, you're here to fix and like save the day. And it's just like, no, I'm here as a host, really, to convene people in conversations ultimately, right, that matter. And the big question is not what are we about to do? That's a good question, but I think the question that precedes that is who do we need to become so that we can do what we haven't been able to do, right? And if we can answer that question and lean into that work, then the rest of it will take care of itself. But folks are like, just give me all the little technical things. Give me the three things I could do, and then we're going to be an anti-racist organization. And it's like, yeah, nah, this is much harder than that. Like, I need you to picture hopping on this treadmill, you know what I'm saying, and running some miles and giving up the good food that you like and all those kinds of things. Like, it's a sacrifice. And at the end of the day, people ain't trying to sacrifice nothing. They ain't trying to be put in harm's way. Um, let's just have a department, say we're doing race and equity work, and mark off the checkbox. And that's the part of it, I think, for all of us, at least for me, it's exhausting.
I think it is, and I think what you're bringing up though, that hero part of it. Like, I don't know, when I work with folks of color, and they usually are not the leadership, that is what I encourage them, is that they are the leaders. Like John, to your point, like they do not need to look to those that are in formal authority to make change within the organization. And that if they could stop riding their coattails, they could stop riding the coattails of even that one person that's been, that they identify as a hero. Like, why are they not their own heroes? Like, why are they not seeing themselves as able to like lead transformatively as a collective group, you know? Especially when they're on a group, like it's a group of folks usually that I'm working with. So I appreciate y'all. We could keep going and we could have like, 6 videos from our conversation. But I just really want to say thank you, and appreciate y'all being just who you are, which is fucking amazing, and how we go deep in like 20 minutes. And I'm filled up on everything that's been said. And I feel like everything that's been said, folks of color that are in positions of leadership, or even who are not, like have a sense of understanding, and it's resonating. Maybe some of us will have more grace. Maybe some of us will actually push more, right? And maybe some of us will actually see ourselves as, the mechanism for change within the organization. So I will say we got like 2 minutes, really only one, but like final word, what would be the final thing you would want to say specifically, like, because I really hope this is part of that healing process for leaders of color to sustain in this work, so we're not burning out after 3 years every cycle. What would be the final thing you would say to like encourage them to face their fears and not lead out of a fear-based leadership? And whoever feels ready to go, you can go ahead.
I think I just would encourage folks to really kind of slow down enough to kind of be reflective. Um, so much of this stuff is it moves at such a rapid pace that we tend to not have the time to sit still and go, combining like hindsight, insight, doing that personal work. And then I think that creates kind of the foresight that we kind of want to have in terms of the world that we could live into. Because when we think about these institutions and systems, the reality is we're living into the imagination that some people had 400 years ago. And in
Mm,
order for us to move into this new world and this new way of being, it's going to take us to have a moral imagination. And I think that means sitting still long enough to be able to be reflective in that. The last thing I'll say is I think it's important that we bind together and that we elevate, right, and lift each other up. Um, because some of this stuff is so divisive, right? And I'm just going to name one thing quickly is just sometimes the tension I think between that exists between black men and black women, right? And how can we be more intentional to elevate each other and to understand that? I mean, I think nature gives us a powerful lesson in terms of feminine and masculine energy, right? And how important both of those things are together to produce life, right? In ways that could just be so powerful. And so I think it's finding who our partners are and who those people are that we can actually be in community and what our village is and moving into friendships and away from fear ships, right? Like people who just
mm,
don't want to actually do the work and aren't committed and don't want to build and want to make it about other things rather than what it should be, right? Which is centering beloved community.
yeah. Damn. Okay. I'm called. Let's hear from Krishan. Thanks, Derek.
I would say that you have to understand if you walking into this work, it has to take a personal first approach. You can't do anything else without that first. And you have to really begin to pay attention to all of the things you haven't been paying attention to and ask yourself why.
Mm, mhm,
That your beliefs have a big are the center around why you're not paying attention to the things you need to be paying attention to.
mhm,
And a lot of that has to do with yourself and digging into all the things that you think you know, but you really don't. But more importantly, centering all the things that you don't know. So that way you can understand how to be in community with someone intraracially and interracially and across genders and across languages. You got to
Yes.
do your work first. You got to do your work first and pay attention to all the things that you're not paying attention to and ask yourself why.
mhm,
Word.
mhm,
Yeah. I mean, I'll echo what everyone has said before me. I think the one thing that I would add is, you know, um, to aspiring leaders of color is, the imposter syndrome that you may feel. That's colonialism of the mind. That's white supremacy trying to capture your brain and capture what you view of yourself. And you have to face that, and you have to be willing to stare that down, because if you don't liberate your vision of who you are, then how can you ever expect to liberate anybody else or look to try to change the system?
Come on.
Uh, and that's the one thing. I mean, they may be able to lock your body up, but they can't trap your mind. You
mm,
know, you got to show up every day and be willing to fight that.
mm.
Um, and so, I mean, that's all I have
Not all you have.
for now. Until part two.
For now. Well, that was a lot. And that's what every single advice, every fucking human being who identifies as a person of color really needs on a regular basis. So y'all have given a gift. Um, and I love y'all. And I'm super appreciative.
Love you too. You got hella fucks. Where you get all them fucks from? Are they on
Eh,
sale?
did I say that? Do I not say that regularly? I say that regularly, so much my baby might start saying it. I gotta. Yeah. So, because I'm excited, maybe what it is. But thank y'all. I'm super appreciative. Everybody paying attention. I hope you are. Because this is like some serious wisdom that y'all are getting here. So thanks, y'all. Peace out.
So good seeing y'all. Love you, Derek. Love you,
Uh,
John.
love you
Tracy.
too. Love you,
Y'all.
John. Tracy. Peace and power to y'all. Keep going. We need you.